The Rangers have a lot to do this offseason, but could a self-imposed, or should I say ownership-imposed budget crisis make this the worst-case scenario winter? Talk about what that might look like and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers, the first and best daily Rangers podcast. I'm Patrick, a criminally addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 12 seasons, including all 7 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. You can follow me on Twitter at Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, on today's show, we're talking about the worst case scenario for the Rangers offseason. What does the worst case scenario look like? What does a gutted budget look like? What if the Rangers ownership decides to cry absolutely brokest of broke? Could that look like? Before we get into all that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Now, the biggest sports news of the day, you're probably already listened to Locked On Mavs talking about the firing of Nico Harrison. Shout out Locked On Mavs boys. What a great day I'm sure it is for them and for the city of Dallas in general. But this ownership group, while not quite as toxic as the Mavs ownership group, they are really talking about pulling those purse strings, shutting off the flow of cash, and the Rangers having a constricted budget from where they have been the last couple of seasons. It is incredibly frustrating. I did an entire episode on it last week on Thursday, talking about how this is just more blustering from ownership so they can make more money by having to spend less money and pretending like they are broke when they are not. But if they do follow through with it, which I'm not sure that they will get to this kind of a number with the payroll, which is still in the top half. It's not like, I don't think in any scenario they just fully gut this thing and just trade off anything that's not nailed down. I don't see that being a scenario that works, because everyone's going to jump ship completely on this organization if they just fully tear this thing down to the studs after missing the postseason for 2 years, having teams that should have been talented enough to make the postseason, maybe even make a run in a not great AL West. This team has disappointed for sure in the last 2 seasons, but they also have not been poured into financially in the way that they should have. But when Evan Grant did an article about this a couple weeks ago, his spitball budget was about $220 million. This would give the Rangers right now, from where they are, $11 million. $11 million if they did not cut bait with anybody, if they did not trade off any of their current salaries, that would give them $11 million. But I think the Rangers are going to non-tender Jonah Heim. That frees up $6 million. I do think they are going to end up moving on from Adolis Garcia. I hope they don't. I talked about what the best case scenario looks like if they don't do that, and if they put the budget where I think it should be, which is still not even in the luxury tax, which is where a team of this market sized, it's not like this is some tiny little Pittsburgh team. It's not New York. It's not LA, but it's darn near close to Chicago with the amount of homes that Rangers games can be broadcasted. So the budget should be about commensurate with that. A top 5, top 7, at the very least top 10 budget. And this would put them, I think, out of the top 10 and more towards the middle. But a $220 million budget, you cut off Adolis Garcia, you cut off Jonah Heim, that's $19 million extra. So that gives you $30 million about to play with for the budget in this exercise, putting them right around $220 million, which it's not where they should be. They should be much closer to that luxury tax that's going to be at $245 million. At the very least, I'd say $230 million. I'd say closer to $240. Maybe give yourself $5 million in wiggle room for incentives and things like that. But for this exercise, at the worst case scenario, we're going $220 million. So what do the Rangers need? Well, they need 1.5 starting pitchers. They need 4 relievers. They need a backup catcher, because they have done away with their other backup catcher, who's probably past time to move on with the Rangers, especially if in arbitration he would make $6 million, which Jonah Heim, God love him, World Series champion, all-star, not a $6 million a year player for a team that is imposing its own financial woes upon itself. And maybe you need a right-handed bat. Probably, you're probably not going to be able to afford that with this kind of a shoestring budget. But all right, let's start with. No, I do want to. I do want to address the one thing that Evan Grant that talked about in that article, spitballed of a trade of Jacob deGrom. He spitballed the trade of Jacob deGrom to Atlanta for Spencer Strider, which does not make sense because it's not even saving you that much money, and you're getting a guy who is not as far removed from Tommy John surgery, who I don't think the Braves want to trade away because he is on a pretty reasonable contract for a pitcher of his caliber who signed that extension with Atlanta. Also, Jacob deGrom has a no trade clause. I don't see any scenario where they trade him. Nathan Eovaldi also has a no trade clause. They're not trading away Evo. Evo's not letting that happen. And Corey Seager, you trade away the World Series MVP from your first ever World Series championship 2 years after he wins that World Series. The fans are full on revolting. Maybe everyone just gathers together to just defecate on the stadium at once in a sign of organized protest. I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen, but the at least emotional equivalent of that would happen. So for this exercise, we're not trading away Jacob deGrom, not trading away Noel Scars, or not trading away Marcus Semien or Corey Seager or Nathan Eovaldi. I don't see a realistic world in which that happens without some kind of massive revolt. And since literally in the same city, they just saw what happens to a franchise when you trade away the star player in his prime to be cheapos, the entire city and fan base revolts around you. Do not repeat the Luka trade. Do not repeat the Micah Parsons trade. Do not be that franchise. And I don't think Chris Young will let this franchise become that. So let's start with the starting pitchers. 1.5 starting pitchers. What if we round that down to just one because budget constraints? And we also go more on the cheap side because the Rangers need a certified closer. And I fear that may get an outsized portion of the budget because the Rangers need probably 4 relievers. If you really want to get away with 3, I don't see a scenario where that's likely, and they still need to get a backup catcher. So let's just look at one of the guys who is on the buy low kind of a tier of starting pitchers, a guy who is durable, who is going to go out there, who's going to make starts, because if you're only signing one starting pitcher, you need to count on him for at least 25 to 30 starts. Really, you'd like 30, 28, 32, somewhere in that range of a full season. You would like him to be able to give you 150, 180 innings or so. And the Rangers just got that from somebody. It's Patrick Corbin. He's projected to sign a 1-year, $5.5 million deal. And geez, if that's the one move that you make in your rotation, then I don't love it, but I think it makes the most sense in this scenario where the Rangers are being very diligent with their budget. And if they decide they really need a top end closer, you can get a guy who you can count on for 30 starts. Made 30 starts last year, over 150 innings, was worse than league average, was a little better in the first half, had some moments of being really darn good, and then had some moments of being, well, kind of what he's been for the last half decade. This is a guy who does not miss time, who is not a good starting pitcher overall, but is a helpful part of your team. He is going to be heading into his age 36 season, so maybe that durability starts to go. But I mean, he has been pretty much the peak of durability for the last 7 seasons, basically since 2015. Like that, he has made basically every start since 2015. Has he been great in all those starts? No. Has he been bad in a lot of those starts? Yeah, but he has made those starts. And if you are spending that money, I could have seen the Rangers, if they wanted to go a little bit less expensive on the closer. I also kicked around the idea of maybe a reunion with Merrill Kelly, because he had been pretty durable for most of his career, but I mean, he missed a lot of time in 2024. He's 37 years old. I don't know that giving $16 million a year to a 37-year-old, where you'll have 3 guys who are 36 or older in your rotation. I guess that'll still be the case if they go ahead and make this move for Patrick Corbin. But if you sign Merrill Kelly to that deal, you've got 3 guys, 3/5 of your rotation that are 36 or older, making 16 or more $million per season. That is a lot of this budget tied up in guys who are older, who Well, Merrill Kelly doesn't have a long injury history. Evo and DeGrom definitely do. I'm still counting on both of them for about 25 starts next year. Hopefully, you can get about 150 innings out of both of them at the very least. DeGrom's targeting 30 starts and 200 innings. I think that's maybe a bit aggressive, but if you're going to go sign one guy, you got to go make sure that he is going to make all of those starts. And while there are not a whole lot of guys you can count on to make all those starts, you got to make some sacrifices there. And I think that this makes the most sense if the Rangers really want to get aggressive with some of their bullpen acquisitions. Coming up, we're going to talk about the closer who the Rangers could throw a big old bag of cash at, something they've been reluctant to do in years past. And here's who I think they go throw that money at right after this. This show is brought to you by Gametime. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Gametime is fast, it's easy, and is backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included, so the price you see is actually the price you pay. If you want to get tickets to a Mavs game because you are no longer supporting a team that supports Nico Harrison, you can get tickets on Gametime. It is the fastest and easiest way. It's the best way I found getting tickets for anything. Concerts, comedy, baseball, basketball, hockey, whatever you're looking at, Gametime's got tickets for all of it. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. Shout out to everybody that's making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, I'll be going in the middle ground, looking at the most realistic case scenario for the Texas Rangers' off season, somewhere in the middle ground between the highest of highs and the lowest of lows targeted in all of these off-season scenarios. That'll be on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Rangers. Now, we have established the 1.5, which is rounded down to one starting pitcher that the Rangers needed. We're not rounding down on the bullpen arms, although we are going to be looking at the top tier of bullpen arms, which you may be saying, hey, this is a budget. This is the poor year. How are you going to spend a bunch of money on a closer? That's why I think it's the worst case scenario, is the Rangers spending a whole bunch of money on a closer. Now, there are some really good closers on this market that could be way out of the Rangers price range. And even this is a bit of an aggressive contract for the Rangers. I saw them going after Josh Hader, and I was scared out of my gourd. I thought the Rangers can build and have built a much better bullpen on the cheap. That's the one thing. There have been some criticisms of Chris Young in the way that he has built some of his teams the last couple of seasons. He did a great job in 2023 of being aggressive at the deadline, of making those moves. He is the GM of the World Series Championship, the only one in franchise history. He has done a good job of revolutionizing how they develop pitchers. All that's been good, but how he has built the bullpens in free agency, one of the most difficult things to do. Even teams with, massive budgets have spent lots of money and failed. I mean, look at what the Dodgers bullpen looked like this year. I mean, at the very end of the season, it was Roki Sasaki, and heck, it was Yamamoto on 0 days rest, closing out the World Series for the Dodgers, who had just the biggest budget ever. Even big budget teams get things wrong. And I think that the Rangers could pivot too hard in the direction of we need a closer and spending a whole bunch of money on these closers. I don't think they go for Edwin Diaz. I think that gets out of their price range. I think Robert Suarez also gets out of their price range. I think they are too smart to try and go for Pete Fairbanks. Maybe Kenley Jansen is a more reasonable option that I should have put here, but I could see the Rangers just going really hard in on a guy that is a certified closer who has got that experience, who is not coming off of the best year, but in years past had been truly incredible. That is Devin Williams. And you may hear that and say, wow, Yankees fans hated him last year. He was awful last year. Well, for the most part, he was not great for the Yankees in 2025. But before that, this guy had been one of the best relievers, if not the best reliever in all of baseball from basically 2020 to 2024. That is a 5-year span where he wasn't an all-star in 2020, but that rookie season that he had that year, he pitched in 22 games, 27 innings, a 0.33 ERA. Yeah, let me say that again, a 0.33 ERA. One earned run the whole season in that shortened season, a solo home run, one of 8 hits that he allowed in those 27 innings, and he struck out nearly two batters per 9 innings. Nearly two batters per inning. 17.7 Ks per nine. This guy was unreal. Was a Rookie of the Year award winner, 7th in Cy Young voting in that shortened season, an All-Star in 22 and 23, missed time with injury in 24, did not miss time with injury in 25, but did give up more than his fair share of home runs. His best pitch is the airbender. It is a changeup that is not really a changeup, basically just a 2-pitch pitcher. And that fastball was not as great this year as it had been in years past. In 2024, he missed some time with a bilateral back fracture, had some surgery on that, not invasive procedure, but still, anytime you hear back injury, you think, oh boy, that is a terrifying. But he's 31 years old. And according to Just Baseball, the contract they had projected for him is somewhere in the 3 to 6 year range, $12 to $20 million. I went somewhere right about towards the top-ish end. I went 5 years, $15 million a year, so $75 million. That would be a lot of money for a closer, and that would be literally half the budget. You have $30 million to play with. Half the budget being spent on a closer is a way I think the Rangers could go. I think it is possible. I don't like it. I think they do need somebody with a little bit of closer experience. I do think that 9th inning role is a little bit different. But why I always get, antsy about spending big money on a closer is, what if that guy sucks? What if that guy sucks? And then who is your guy with 9th inning experience that you plug in there? What do you do with a guy who's making $15 million? And that would be over 5 years. I mean, that's not a short contract. I don't think he's going to get somewhere in the 3-year range. This was his worst season of his career by a pretty wide margin. He'd only, before this year, in full seasons, I guess 2019, the first little taste he had of the big leagues in 13 games there, he had a 3.95 ERA. But before this year, he'd only had one season where he had an ERA north of 2. And that was a 2.5 ERA in 2021. This year, a 4.79 ERA in 67 games, 62 innings, still a crap ton of strikeouts, 13 per 9. For his career, 14 strikeouts per 9. This guy gets a lot of swing and miss. He did have a big problem with walks this year. Walk rate was in the bottom quarter of baseball. Did get hit hard. The barrel rate was in the bottom third of baseball. Average exit velo was also below average this year, but the strikeout rate, the whiff rate, the chase rate, all those in the top 3% of baseball. Extension was back to being very good. It was not great in 2024 after coming back from that back injury, but still, even missing time working around that back injury in 2024, he had a 1.25 ERA in 22 games. This guy still notched 14 saves that season, 18 saves this year, and for his career, 86 saves. This is a guy who is one of the best relievers in all of baseball. He's going to demand a big old contract. He is not the top dog on this market. I could see Kenley Jansen being a more reasonable option. He would just probably get a 1-year deal. He got 1 year, $10 million from the Angels last year. And if the Rangers did that instead of Jock Peterson and then had $8 million to spend elsewhere on a different hitter to bolster this lineup, maybe the season takes a different turn. I don't know. It's very easy to say that in hindsight, but you've got guys like Suarez and Helsley and Diaz and Fairbanks, who I think are all going to make a lot more money. Fairbanks, actually, I don't know. I think Fairbanks might make less money than Devin Williams, but still, it is an interesting spot that the Rangers put themselves in, and there's still more work to do on this bullpen. They still need 4 relievers, and the next guy on this list, another pricey reliever, which would make the Rangers have to spend at the very bottom of the barrel after this. We're talking about who that is and what's left of this budget right after this. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score the next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your bets into a same game parlay for a bigger shot at a bigger payout. Now, let's look a little bit at these FanDuel odds for these Dallas Mavericks and what they might do now that they are probably, hopefully, no longer going to be playing Marvin's Room before each game because they are celebrating since Nico Harrison is no longer the GM. Right now, to miss the playoffs, that is more likely, according to FanDuel, at minus 360 to make the playoffs at plus 250 for these Dallas Mavericks. So right now, head to FanDuel, and new customers are getting $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Now, let's look at the rest of this bullpen. The Rangers still would have 3 more relievers to build out the rest of this bullpen, according to this exercise, in the worst case scenario. And this is a guy who has been with the Texas Rangers, had a mostly good stint there last year. That's Phil Maton. He's projected to sign a 2-year, $14.2 million deal, $7.1 million per year. That's a lot of money to spend on a reliever who is not a closer. That is more money than the Rangers are spending on their rotation in this exercise. Maybe that's unreasonable. Maybe the Rangers don't sign Phil Maton, but I know that there's a lot of interest there. $7 million, maybe a bit much. It's more than he made last year, but he's coming off a season where he did not give up a lot of home runs, just at the very worst times in closer spots as a member of the Texas Rangers. He still did not beat himself with walks, and he had a lot of strikeouts and mostly limited the hard contact. It's still, the overall numbers weren't that bad with Texas, but they felt a lot worse than they actually were. He did end up giving up, 2 home runs that were just huge backbreakers in 23 games with Texas. The 3.5 ERA was just fine. But this is a guy who I think the Rangers can trust. He is still, not young, but not old. I mean, he's heading into his age 33 season. He's 32 this season and had a really solid season. He's been pretty solid for the last 3 years. He's been a little bit up and down. I think he is finding his stride as he is entering his mid-30s. $7 million a year is a lot for a reliever, but a guy who I think you could trust in the postseason, has strikeout stuff, who could be your setup guy, and you'd feel pretty darn good about it. Maybe you swap him out here for Sean Armstrong, and that opens up some other things. But it still puts the Rangers in a bit of a bind. Jose Leclerc, I think, is the next guy on this list that I would want in this role, projected to sign a 1-year, $1.1 million deal. I know there still was a lot of vitriol towards Jose Leclerc, despite him being the one that put the team on his back. The horrendous bullpen in 2023. This man had the best month of his freaking life at the most important moment on the biggest stage against the best opponents. And he didn't really follow that up in 2024, but lost that closer job pretty quickly to the guy who is next on this list in Kirby Yates. But Jose Leclerc has had a rough couple of seasons since leaving rough season. Season with the Oakland A's since leaving this organization. He did not pitch for most of this season. A buy low $1 million deal for a reliever that's just barely above league minimum. That's fine. That's fine. That's good. He's got closer experience in some big moments. I would not want to put him as the Rangers closer on day one. The walks will probably still be a problem, but the strikeout stuff still very much there, still familiar with this organization, and still a guy. If this is your 7th, 6th inning guy, I feel pretty darn good about Jose Leclerc, especially on a $1 million deal. Next guy on this list I just talked about, Kirby Yates, 1 year, $1.1 million. Again, that's barely above league minimum. He had a really, really rough season last year with injuries and with underperformance with the Dodgers. Maybe everyone will think that he's washed and not anywhere near what he was in 2024. The Rangers wouldn't be signing him, expecting him to come in and, put up a 1.17 ERA. But, he's heading into his age 39 season. If he wants to keep pitching, I don't think there's going to be some big money deal waiting for him. I don't think the Dodgers are going to be like, yeah, we got to bring you back because last year was so great. It wasn't. He had an ERA north of 5.5. It was a bad time. Excuse me. North of 5. It was 5.2, not north of 5.5. My apologies to Kirby Yates. But it was a rough year for sure. And the Rangers could see him and bring him back and try and get the most out of him and think, oh yeah, we kind of know how to do that. But with Mike Maddox gone, maybe some of that magic isn't quite there to get the most out of Kirby Yates. But if he's at least just, fine, if he's what he was in Atlanta in 2023, before he signed with Texas, a 3.2 ERA and, 12 Ks per 9, and still had a little bit of problem with the walks and had more of a problem with the homers than he did with Texas. But that's still a really good reliever and at a very good price. It's just, does he want to keep pitching and would he come back to Texas? I think the answer to both is yes. And that's why I think the Rangers should take a look at him. Even if it's more in the $2 million range, I still think that's a very good deal. But for this exercise and for this budget constraint, we're going $1.1 million because that's what SpotTrack says. So that puts the Rangers right now at $29.8 million. That's $200,000 short of the budget. So we're going to have a surplus here because the Rangers still need a backup catcher, but I am buying at the lowest end of that market possible. There are not a whole lot of catchers that are available in free agency right now, but the least expensive guy on this list for a reason is Christian Vasquez, who is coming off of a season where he just did not hit at all. I mean, Vasquez just was, I think, the worst hitter in all of baseball last year. I mean, truly, really terrible. And I believe 2 of his 3 home runs on the season came against the Texas Rangers. I mean, the man had 14 RBIs, and I really do think that about 5 of them came in a few of his games against Texas. It was really just rough. I mean, he's still a very good defensive catcher. He's not going to command a high salary. I don't think. Maybe he'll end up costing $2 million because even a bad catcher these days costs about $2 million. Like Austin Hedges made $4 million last year. I don't know if it was a multi-year deal because I'm not seeing him on this list of free agent catchers. So maybe the Guardians have already locked down their boy who brings in ostrich eggs and brings in vibes for sure. I would honestly rather bring in Austin Hedges than bring in really any of these backup catchers that are really out there. Maybe Victor Caratini is a better option, but still, I think this is what makes the most sense for this budget. Still $800,000 over budget. If the Rangers really wanted to get just extra cheap, they could go to one of these guys who is in arbitration and say Josh Spores or Sam Haggerty and could just straight up cut bait with them. I mean, Haggerty's projected to make $1.25 million. That's really pinching pennies. Spores is projected to make $1.1 million. I don't know if he's going to pitch in the big leagues again because that shoulder injury was nasty. Maybe a full offseason to recover and a full season to recover is enough for him to come back and be anywhere near the version of himself that we had seen before. But yeah, that's what this shoestring budget's going to look like. That if the Rangers do shoehorn themselves into a $220 million a year budget, that's kind of what things are going to look like. Maybe they don't end up signing closer. Maybe they go similar to how they did this year of building a bullpen on the cheap because they still have a lot to do on their bullpen. They need to sign at least 3, if not 4 relievers this offseason. That's remaking basically the entirety of this bullpen. The only guys who are going to be back in that bullpen are, well, we'll see a little bit of Robert Garcia. Hopefully not in the closer role. Again, I think that's just a job that's not suited for him. Jacob Webb will be back in this bullpen. Jacob Latz is almost assuredly going to be in this rotation, and how many innings and starts the Rangers can get out of him, I don't know how many innings and starts they can get out of Kumar Rocker next year. That is going to be a big factor in how big they are spending on this rotation, but that's kind of where this would land the Rangers if they are hamstringing themselves by ownership decree, not because they can't spend, because they don't want to spend. And I get it a little bit. The team has underperformed with a budget commensurate with where they should be the last couple of years. It's not where I'd like them to be, but it's about where they should be. It's not an embarrassment. It's not a, oh boy, this ownership group is so cheap. They're not providing any kind of resources. They are, but I really do think they could have spent a lot more after that World Series to kind of bulk up that team. And instead, they decided to kind of pump the brakes and immediately kill all that momentum where there's plenty of money left from this ownership group and from this team. This franchise is making a lot of money. Major League Baseball franchises make a lot of money off your tickets, off your merchandise, off the World Series gear, off of sports gambling. Those companies have to pay the leagues a lot of money to license those rights. These teams, these organizations that I have just talked about in this show have to pay the leagues a lot of money to get the rights to go do those things. Those companies are doing very well. And so they are paying lots of money in licensing fees, which goes directly to the teams who do not have to open their books to show you how poor they actually are, which makes me believe, and makes it very much in their financial interest to say, oh no, we're so poor. How poor are we? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Well, show us your books. Show us how you're actually losing a whole bunch of money. No, they would never do that because it would show you that they've got money to spend. But because they are crying poor already and cutting pennies in the hundreds of thousands of dollars already on guys like Colby Lewis in the front office as just special assistants to the GM, they're losing out on Mike Maddox going to the Angels, because it seems like they were not willing to pay him a contract commensurate with what he should be getting paid as, I'd say, pretty comfortably the best pitching coach in Major League Baseball and definitely the best pitching coach in the history of this franchise. Now, maybe it's just because Mike Maddox wanted to change with Bruce Bochy no longer there, but the warning signs are there. The canary is in the coal mine and it died. And if the Rangers have a budget like this and this is the offseason they have, maybe they're competitive. Maybe they're competitive in 2026. The last year before, I'm pretty darn sure a lockout will at least cut off a decent chunk of the season in 2027. I think it would be a travesty if they did spend that last season with guys like Jacob deGrom and Nathan Eovaldi and not quite Marcus Semien, but a little bit Marcus Semien, but definitely Corey Seager in their primes. And hamstringing them with a budget like this would put them in a rough spot, and I would think be a huge disservice to both this fan base and to the players who committed to play here with these big contracts and the ones who at least are living up to it, and even the ones who at some point did live up to it. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank you all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.